Good morning, fish keepers. Cam here from the fishroom.co.nz. We've done it. We've made it to Friday. Let's do coffee. Hot but good. Just a couple of quick notes before we get any further. John is not with us today. He has some family business to attend to. And secondly, it was brought to my attention last night that this Monday is a public holiday here in New Zealand, so we'll be closed. I kind of forgot that it was coming up. Completely forgot that it was coming up. So this Monday will be closed. I am sorry. That's enough of that. We'll bring on our guest. I'd like to introduce Daniel Konn-Vetterlein. Oh, I didn't quite get it right that time. Sorry.
The first try was better, yeah. Hello.
Yeah, it was. Sorry. How are you today? You happy? Everyone's good?
Oh, yeah, very much. Thank you. Hope you too. After the 20 minutes of, how did you call it? Stressful morning.
Yeah.
I caused for you.
Wasn't much fun, but yeah, we'll get through that, and it's part and parcel of fish keeping. We'll move through it, I guess. I hope.
Yeah.
All right. So, can you please introduce yourself and sort of let people know who you are and what a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. Well, Daniel, of course, my name. I'm from Germany, and I work mainly with all kind of catfish from South America. So it all started with like L numbers, plecos, all the common stuff like Hypancistris, Picoltia. And very soon I got into the other families too, like all the woodcat families, for example, the big pims. There's so many beautiful species that we do not know much about. And when I was 15, I think I traveled for the very first time to Bolivia, and yeah, that's when it all like really hit off. So that's when I started to catch my own fish, go on expeditions, plan expeditions, and to do like a bit more serious. Before it was more like I want one of this, one of this. So I was collecting catfish, to be honest. But I think everybody does in the very beginning, so it's not too bad. Yeah, and that's well, it was 15, 16. I started to think about more the scientific part of it and the breeding part, all that propagation part. Yeah. Otherwise, when I'm not into fish keeping, well, one of my hobbies you can see in the back, it's I love cycling. So that's one of my 9 bicycles I have at the moment. And it's pretty much almost as big as the fish keeping hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah, what else can I say? Yeah, I'm a biologist, of course. Yeah. So I study biology and also did some Spanish studies, but I don't see myself as a like teacher. So more like a biologist. Yeah. That's
Very
maybe the
good.
most interesting part about me.
Cool. At what age did you get involved in keeping fish? You mentioned sort of around 15. Was there a time before that you had aquariums?
Yeah, well, I started in the age of 10 with that typical 50 liters tank, some a so-called pair of Corridoras, one was Pleco and the typical 6 neon tetras. So it took me about 4 to 5 years to get really into the hobby, like to get groups of fish and to look at the water needs and to put on all the right parameters. Yeah, but then it went straight ahead.
Cool. Fantastic. And what sparked your initial interest in catfish? Because that's what most people will know you from is your catfish part of your life.
Well, I think in the beginning that made it all start was I'm very much into dark colors. Like I like a dark gray, for example, and almost all of my catfish are dark gray. So I do keep some zebras and that common fancy stuff, but I'd say like 90% of my fish are either gray or black. And this is what made them so interesting to me in the very beginning. I don't know why. Maybe it's also because they're living close to the ground because for a short while I was also very much into loaches, which like luckily this time stopped because I think blackouts or catfish are much better now. But I was also for a few months into loaches, so it might be that they're living close to the bottom, they hide all the day. So maybe this is part of it for me. I can't really tell, to be honest.
Yeah, just just kind of developed and away you went.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't like swimming fish too much. So I do have some tetras and some cichlids and some other stuff, of course, but they're more like a dither fish. So they're more for my girlfriend to keep the tanks busy. So they look busy. And
Mm-hmm.
whenever people come over, like, all your tanks are so empty. Why don't you keep any fish in here? And then I can say, well, can you stay there? There's you have a red platy and you have some colorful fish. So they're here too. That's
Yeah.
the reason.
Yeah. Yeah. How many aquariums, just off out of interest, how many aquariums do you currently have?
Currently, normally it's about 16, 17, 18, something like that. So it always
Yeah.
depends, of course. If I'm breeding a specific species, I put up 2 or 3 more tanks to raise the juveniles. But yeah, mostly it's 15, 16. I do have some, most of them are in my apartment. Some are on the balcony too, especially now
Yeah.
in summer. So in Germany, summer started like 3 to 4 weeks ago. And I started to put fish outside, fish from Europe or from Turkey, from Northern America. So whenever I can, I put up a new tank, of course. So we have to do that.
Cool. So is it quite warm in Germany throughout the summertime outside?
Yeah, it's pretty much, yeah, it's very similar to like the climate in Northern America. So we have,
Yeah.
let's say, between 15 degrees at night in summer and maybe at daytime 25 to 28 Celsius. So it's
Cool.
very easy to keep fish on your balcony.
Yeah, nice
Like
one.
Eurasian killifish, for example, Aphanios, Aphanioides, that stuff. They're
Mm-hmm.
very easy to keep in Germany in summer outside.
Cool. Can you tell us about your first experience with keeping catfish?
Yeah, the first experience was very sad because I had that it was about this mentioned corridors pair. My
Mm-hmm.
father bought it for me when I was on a short vacation trip, and I came home to see that pair. And as a totally beginner, of course, I knew immediately which one was the female and the male. So I just decided that the fatter, the bigger one, was supposed to be the male. I didn't know anything about like gender differences back that time. And I think it was 3 or 4 days later, the female was suddenly dead. So I was very sad, and my father said, "Well, we now have to get you some new catfish and some new ones." We went out to a shop, and then I got into the vast, yeah, like the huge diversity of catfish. I saw my first suckermouth catfish. I saw the first algae cleaner catfish and all that stuff. And that was the moment when I decided, okay, the first real pleco I want was Acanthicus adonis, that huge species growing to 1 meter 20 almost. And they also get pitch black. And it was my favorite fish. It still is, but it was also very difficult to buy because back that time we didn't have any Facebook groups, so there was no social media marketing. So I was checking our daily newspapers where they sell cars and houses and stuff like that. And I was always looking after fish, 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 and pets. Many people sold cats and dogs, but nobody sold any fish. And then suddenly, I think 6 months afterwards, somebody mentioned, I have a huge black pleco to sell and it has white spots. And I was like, well, the chances are low, but this could actually be Acanthicus adonis. So I talked my dad into driving me there to this guy's place. And it was almost a 2 hour drive. And he did actually really sell Acanthicus adonis. So we went home with this little pleco. I was the happiest boy alive back that day. Yeah, and since then I always keep Acanthicus adonis, even if they get far too big. But once they reach 40 centimeters, I give them away to friends with bigger tanks, and then I
Yeah.
get some juveniles again.
Cool.
Yeah, that
I think
species
it's
is
quite.
like it's always with me for the last 20 years now.
I think it's absolutely incredible that you drove a couple hours on a whim, hoping that you might have picked up this right fish, and it was the fish that you
Yeah,
wanted. Yeah.
yeah, I'm still very thankful, well, especially for my dad, but both of my parents. So they always supported me. Like
Nice.
when we planned the first time going to a fair, also like a trip for 1.5 or close to 2 hours. And I didn't knew anybody before, so only from the internet, from the elverse.com forum. And of course, my parents were like, well, you don't go there alone. You're 11 or 12 years old.
Yeah.
No way. So my father went with me and he always walked behind me, like just a few steps. But so I felt independent,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
also knew, okay, my father's always watching me. And yeah, afterwards it was like, well, you met so many people and they all knew you, and you seemed to know everybody, and you were talking so much about fish. So he said, well, if you want to go again next year, I'll take you again. Yeah, good, very,
Cool.
very, very good support. Yeah, absolutely.
Very supportive. Yeah, it's fantastic. Cool. Where are we at with this? We did have a question off the floor. How long have you been doing expeditions for?
Well, as I said, the first expedition was when I was, it wasn't like a planned expedition. So when I was 15, I started to ask travel agencies that offered fish expeditions back that day. We do have one or two we had that time in Germany. And there was one, and they were offering expeditions to Colombia. And I just asked them, okay, could you send me some information material? And they sent me all the prices. And my mom saw this because I was 15. And my mom opened the letter and she was like, well, Daniel, what is this? And they're offering you a trip for, I think it was 11,000 euros or 12,000 almost. It was 2 weeks to Colombia. And my mom said, well, if you really want to go to South America, if you really want to go to such a different country, will you make it real? And the day after, she gave me some information material that she ordered, and it was about an exchange year. So she said, if you want to go somewhere, then you go for a year, not only for 2 weeks. So they basically sent me away for 1 year to Bolivia when I was 15. And I learned Spanish there, and I made a lot of friends. And the very, very good part, and I was so lucky of this because I got a host family down there. And I still consider this family also like part of my family. And they run two fish shops. So
Cool.
from Germany, I was sent into a Bolivian family running two fish shops, living in a tropical country. And we went out fishing like almost every Sunday together with my mom and dad in Bolivia. So it wasn't like a real expedition, the first, but it was my first experience in catching and collecting fish. And I made my first biotope observations and stuff like that. And the first real expedition took place in 2012. So when I came back from this exchange year, I had to finish school first, of course. And in 2012, I planned my first expedition. And yeah, I went there for 6 weeks, I think, 5 or 6 weeks. And since then, every year, mostly to Bolivia, because Bolivia is so fascinating and it's huge, and you never get tired of it. But also like the other countries, Peru, Colombia, Brazil, and stuff like that. Yeah,
Cool.
long answer for a very short question.
No, long answers are good. It sounds like almost a perfect match going away for
Yeah,
a year trip to someone that just happened to have fish and fish shops.
well, it was absolutely yeah smashing. Back that day, it wasn't about emails. So I got sent a letter, like an introduction letter from my host family, and they wrote, "Well, we run two fish shops, so we sell ornamental fish and blah 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 blah." And I just stopped reading because when I read, "Okay, we sell ornamental fish," I was like, "Damn!" So you can collect your fish in that country, and your parents are running a fish shop. So
Yeah,
it was perfect, perfect. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
It could not have been a better match. I would not have thought.
No, it was just like much more than only being lucky.
What motivates you to continue studying and photographing fish?
Well, the studying fish, I don't know. I just use more and more time every day. Also, like when I was still in school, so I started to observe my fish for hours and hours every day. I noted slight differences among species, but also among the genera, of course. And when it came to like choosing my subject later for university, it was clear right away. So I wanted to go into biology and then afterwards into ichthyology. So I never really had a second option. It was always about biology. And the photography part started also, I think it was in shortly before 2010, because we've got a German guy. His name is Ralf Heidemann, and he takes like the most stunning and the best pictures you can ever imagine of plecos, like really
Hmm.
perfect pictures. And yeah, he became a very good friend of mine, and he told me that Daniel, you should try too. You should try it. And so I bought my first easy and cheap Canon. Try to get some pictures, and yeah, once it catches you, you have to go on all the time, and you just can't stop. Yeah, now like photography is like it's like a huge hobby now. So also into birds and other stuff, but mainly into fish. So I've got different photo setups running at home. I've got a very good friend who's running a shop, and he keeps sending me fish he doesn't know, or stuff like bycatches or weird patterns, weird individuals. So I always have like maybe 10 or 12 individuals here that I still need to photograph.
Cool.
It's also a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun.
What's some advice or some tips you could give some people regarding taking photos of fish? Is there a couple of things that will make your life a little bit easier that you've found and discovered?
Well, the easiest tip, to be honest, is it doesn't have to do anything with equipment, but if you take pictures of a fish in a glass tank, always wear a black shirt.
Hmm.
So because you don't get any reflections from black shirts. And it took me months to realize, and I had a lot of very nice pictures regarding the fish and his position, but you could always see like a little logo or something from your white or red or blue whatever shirt. So just wear a black shirt and your pictures will get better. That's the first and the cheapest too, because unfortunately photography is also it's a very cost
Hmm.
intensive hobby. But another like, well, personally, that's also like a very personal opinion, but I like to flash my fish, even if you don't get the perfectly 100% natural colors like you get if you only use sunlight, but you do get a better impression of the fish itself. Let's be the scales or the bone plates, so the fish just looks more active, it looks more lively.
Cool.
Another thing, well, what do I do also? Oh yeah, when I started using photo tanks, I thought in the background there needs to be something that's green. So some kind of plant. So sometimes we went out together with a few friends, and we just looked for some green stuff basically that we could put in the back because we thought, okay, there has to be a plant in the back of the fish. And we just went to the neighbor's garden, for example, and stole some stupid plants, some green stuff, and then placed it in the photo tank. And back that day, we thought, wow, we're genius. We're so intelligent to put just some green stuff in that tank. And we liked our pictures. But looking back at those pictures now, they look absolutely stupid. And I feel ashamed to use them. So we got the opportunity to take pictures of great fish that I never saw again afterwards. And nowadays, when I'm writing articles, for example, I'm like, I know I have a picture of this fish, but I don't want to show it to anybody because you can just see garden plants and branches from very common trees here in Germany, and then they're just like plant. It looks like a fence sometimes. So
Yeah.
just yeah, keep it more natural. And something that always looks natural is stones or just some branches without leaves, and then it's very easy and looks much better. So and of course, considering the natural biotopes of most of our fish, you don't really need plants because we like them in our tank at home in the living room, but most fish don't need plants in their tank to be happy. And so you also don't need them in the photo tank.
Do you do you have a specific aquarium that you take your photos in? Is it smaller or bigger or like low iron glass, or is it just whatever the tank the fish is in is the one you're going for?
I've got three different tanks. So the smallest one is 30 centimeters wide. It's like a very typical small photo tank where you can put all the medium-sized placos in. It's decorated with some stones only, so, well, stones and some branches, as I said. It's always running, so and there's always a filter running in it to keep the water clear. And you can easily place the placo on a stone, for example, and then well, you just have to poke it a little bit, and sometimes it takes 2 minutes to get the perfect shot almost, but sometimes it takes 3 or 4 weeks. So the fish really has to live in the tank. That's the easiest setup, especially for placos, because placos, they're much easier to take pictures of than many other, what I call, swimming fish. For
Mhm.
example, if you take pictures of some beautiful tetras, And if you just place them in the photo tank and you want to take the picture right away, they would just look totally gray, white. So they lose all the color, and you have to keep them for another 5, 6 days to make them color up again. So that's a second tank I have for the like hemigramus, Paracheirodon and Chirodon, all that like small tetras.
Yep.
Plus, for example, for the trips, we've got very different tanks without any decoration. So we only use a very, very small, no, it's not a small, but it's not a very deep photo tank. So, and a second sheet of glass. So you can just get a picture like all pitch black. Then you have the beautiful fish in the middle. So it doesn't look natural, but it's the best way to to show a fish in all its glory with all the fins
Mm.
and yeah, it's more like a scientific way of documenting the fish. It doesn't look that
Yep.
nice, but to compare all the fish and the different species, it's the best.
Gives you what you need. Yep. And Rochelle has asked, what about if your tank is in a place with a lot of natural light behind you? Do you find that affects your photos?
Yeah, it sometimes happens, of course. Then there are two ways. So if there is really a lot of light in the back, and if I have the chance, I just change the setup. So I just turn around. If you're out in the wild, that's normally possible. And if it's not possible, because when was that? 2 years ago, for example, we took pictures of some wild elasoma on a how's it called, on a parking space in the US, and there was sun everywhere. And the only way to avoid this is actually to put your flash higher. So the stronger your flash is, the less sun or the less natural light you can get.
Hmm.
And if you have like a very strong flash, it doesn't matter how strong the sun is because the flashing light is just stronger in this part of a millisecond.
Interesting. Did the fish photography come first or the hobby photography come first?
No, the hobby came for hobby
Yeah.
photography came first. Yeah,
Yeah, and then developed into taking photos of fish.
yeah. I
Cool.
mentioned this elvez.com database before. So that's a database and a forum where we show all the L numbers and all the plecos actually. And when I was 10, when I started that hobby, I always wanted to like submit 1 or 2 pictures to this database. But then there were all those perfect pictures, like pictures from magazines, and they were all like just brilliant. But my idea was always, well, I want to have one picture in that database. So I tried fish photography to get into this database. And that was possibly one of the main reasons why I started it all.
So you've said that database a couple times now, and I haven't quite picked it up. Are you saying lnumbers.com?
No, it's a German run page. So it's lwelt.com. Put it in here. It's the translation would be lplecos.com.
Okay. And just for fun, as you were saying it, then the internet connection went a little bit cratchy, so I didn't pick it up again. So I will have a wee look at that later on. Yeah, so you've mentioned it a couple times now, so maybe okay, cool. We'll look through that a little bit later.
Yeah, well,
how do you balance? Far away?
No, sorry. I was just saying that this page is just brilliant, this database.
Yeah. How do you balance your time between research, photography, and writing, and obviously being a hobbyist at the same time?
Oh, well, it all like connects, right? So many people ask like, where do I get all that time from? But difficult to answer, to be honest. But it's always in the same. So like meeting fish people, and then you can use the same event to take some nice pictures, and you of course get information to write about, and then so it all happens at the same time because it's not several hobbies side by side. They're all like merged into one, and
Mm.
that's why well for me it seems very easy actually, but I do get this question very often, especially when people know what else I'm doing. Like I'm running 2 clubs, for example, about fish, And I always get this question, like, where do you get all this time from? But it's all like one hobby. So it feels like not that much time invested.
Okay. Oh, I've just totally lost my train of thought then. Hold on. Wait a minute. We'll pull this one back. Can you discuss your process of writing academic papers for catfish?
Yeah, process. Well, I always liked writing, even in school when it was in class. I always enjoyed writing like stories or also later academic texts. And I started for some German magazines. And then it came US magazines and English magazines, a Spanish magazine too. So, but it's just because I enjoy reading. I love reading, of course, and I always want to contribute to this how to say to this pot of information, because I think it's so great that we can just order books and they have so much information included. And I always thought, okay, if you read all this, then you need to share your information too and your knowledge. So I started with some small articles, and it became more and more. And I got very good feedback in the beginning when I needed it. And people say, "Well, I liked your articles." And now, of course, I know that sometimes there were many mistakes in them, or sometimes the language wasn't so good. But the feedback was always great. So I sat down at home and I wrote something else. And after going on all those expeditions, people said, "Well, what did you see? What did you catch? What did you eat? What did you do?" And people asked me all over and all over and all over again. So I thought, well, I'm just writing an article, and then like to once for me, so to relive all this experience, but also to like to show people or to tell people who are interested. Well, not everybody has to read my articles, of course. And yeah, and so I just kept writing, and it got more and more. And yeah, well, people now say, well, could you write about this? Could you write about that? Sometimes I write about topics that nobody wants to hear about, and but I still like the article, and I know it's published and it's out there, it's somewhere. And if somebody should ever get the idea to Google this topic, then he will find it, and then that's good.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I kind of picked up my train of thought from what I was going with before. And it kind of leads in with the process as well. When you're going through and like you're at an event or out in the wild or what have you, I'm assuming that your mind is kind of working. There's some photos here, and you're sort of ticking through a few boxes of things you're trying to remember and write from, and it all kind of just molds itself together. Would that kind of work in the way that I'm sort of thinking?
yeah, yeah, very,
Yeah,
very, very much like this.
yeah, yeah. So it's not that I'm out here today to take photos. Everything's kind of going through at the same sort of thing at the same time, just twisting and working its way through.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. We've had another question from Mike who'd like to say, do the plecos of the middle Xingu have the same mouth structures or different variations?
Well, I hope Mike has brought plenty of time, because that's my favorite like research topic for the last years. Um, well, yeah, that's good. That's one of those questions, people expect or hope for a short answer. I don't know if Mike hopes for a short answer, but
We've got all
basically,
day, mate.
no.
We've got all day.
So, especially if you refer to those like fish as plecos, plecos is like it's a huge family. We have a little bit more than 1,000 species at the moment, and what we found is that you can slightly distinguish the mouth structure types by the habitat or the biotope they live in. So you have, for example, no flow at all, like a lagoon or a lake, something like that. Then you have a medium to slow flow of the water. And then, of course, you have the cachoeiras in the Rio Xingu and the very, very strong currents in mountain creeks. And you can almost identify fish on genus at least, but also sometimes on species level, only by looking at their mouth structure. So they have different attaching structures, attaching organs. And you can also tell apart if a species is mainly feeding on meat or on dead fish, if it is carnivorous, or if it is feeding mainly on herbs, on algae, on plant stuff, on plant-based nutrition. So the answer would be definitely no.
Okay, cool. So how can you tell the difference in what they're feeding on from the mouth structure? How are the differences there?
Well, for example, if you just want to distinguish between plant-based nutrition and meat-based or carnivorous, the carnivorous species, they have small holes in their sucker mouth, so in their oral disc. It's very difficult to explain without pictures, but they look like, how do they look? Yeah, that's a good question. So you do have all this papilla on the suction disc, and between those very small papilla, you have even smaller holes. And the holes are possibly working as something like taste buds. And of course, if you imagine a fish feeding on dead fish, feeding on mollusks, on mussels and snails and stuff, they have to be able to smell to detect their food. And even if stuff like Hypancistrus, Scubinancistrus, Pseudacanthicus, they're not really predatory fish, but they also need to find their food. And they use those little holes. We also call them secretion Drüse. Give me 1 second to look up a word. It is gland. Yeah, right, gland. So it's like a gland for the secretion of a mucus, and they also work like taste buds. And if you have Bariancystus chantellus from Xingu, from exactly the same habitat, they don't have these little holes and taste buds.
Wow.
But we studied close to 80 species meanwhile, and I could give you 65 explanations of different glands and unculi and mouth structures. Yeah, it's a long topic.
Yeah, it certainly would be. You just mentioned them predatory plecos. What are some predatory plecos to start with? And you said like mollusk and crustaceans, and I'm assuming, totally assuming, and I'm sure you'll clarify this, that they'll sort of come up to them, either crush open or break open, that sort of thing, to get their food out of it. Is that how that works, and that kind of thing?
Well, about the mollusks, the snails, you especially have the genus Scubinancistrus, like L14, L48 from Xingu, for example. I know the English name might be something like sunshine pleco, something like that. It's Scubinancistrus aureatus, and they have huge teeth, and they're able to grab the snail with their teeth, and then they just really break it. Some smaller individuals, they suck out the animal from the shell, and the bigger ones, well, they grow up to 40-45 centimeters in the wild, and they just smash and crack the snail's shell with their huge teeth. Other species living in the same habitat, again, to keep it in Xingu, like Chantellus, Bariancyssus chantellus, they have a huge amount of very small teeth, up to 110, 120 in each jaw, and they're not able to smash a snail's shell. But Scubinancistrus, they have 10 to 12, and the teeth are just huge, and they just crack the snails, sometimes even clams. So that's absolutely no problem for them. They also do it in a tank.
Wow, that's fascinating. Like,
Yeah,
I'm sure there'll be
really
a lot of I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that go pleco, eat algae, scratch the front of the glass. That's the end of it. Obviously, that's not the end of it. The fact that they're strong enough to crush and break shells of things to get their thing. I think a lot of people think carnivorous plecos just scavenge on dead fish and dead stuff, not actually actively hunt their prey. That is cool.
They do hunt. Well, if you can call it hunt, they hunt for shrimps sometimes.
Yeah.
But they're not predatory fish, There are some plecos from the genus Leporacanthicus. I think they're vampire plecos, L7, L240, and L91 especially. So they also munch on the silicone in a tank. So if you have very, very bad luck, it's possible that you get down to work, for example, and you find all the water on the floor, and your vampire plecos decided to munch on the silicone, and then they destroyed the tank like that and created a hole, not in the glass, but the silicone.
I can assure you that I don't have vampire plecos in my tank this morning. I wish that I did, because that would be awesome, and that would be a nice way to work out what had happened.
Yeah, it would be a good reason, yeah. I've got some friends, and they keep like really huge specimens of vampire plecos, close to 30 centimeters, and they always glue an extra sheet of glass above the silicone to avoid this.
Yeah, wow. Rebecca has just asked. She recently read a recent paper. Sorry, she's recently read your recent paper. Did you ever look into the diets regarding to Unkuli and wasn't included on the paper?
No, we didn't include it, Rebecca. We took it in regard in the very beginning, but we couldn't include it in this paper because we had too many information already, and it will be published in a third paper with the same topic, and also based in some parts on the research we have already done. But we couldn't include it here because we already had the different parameters from the biotopes, like the water current I was just mentioning before, and it would have been too much in one single paper. So we excluded it, and we saved the information, of course, for the next one. We also did some isotope analysis, like to be really sure what their nutrition is, because in the hobby, as you know, we often say, well, this fish is herbivorous, and in the end, we see it munching on salad, on cucumber, whatever. But in the wild, they feed on mollusks or on freshwater sponges. So we did some isotope analysis on wild-caught specimens, and this will be topic of another paper somewhere in the future.
Cool. Do you and Rebecca know each other? I'm just purely assuming you might do because you're both into L numbers and that kind of stuff, or am I just assuming wrong?
Sorry, I didn't get the first words of the question.
Do you and Rebecca know each other? Because I was just assuming you do because you're both cool. Yeah.
Yeah, we met 2 months ago in England, in Manchester, on the Catfish Convention. Yeah.
Cool. All right, we've had another question from the watchers. Are Corys catfish or just Corys sometimes? Are Corys catfish, or do people just say they're catfish? And how do you categorize their fishes? I think that's what Rochelle is asking.
Well, I see the same as you, Rochelle. I think it depends on your definition of catfish. So, for example, normally, as a German, right? So if you learn the term catfish, it only connects to the species that have very extended barbels, like for example, Ictalurus or Pseudoplatystoma, Fractocephalus, that stuff. Mainly all the big ones. But I learned that, especially in England, catfish is a term you can use on cories, on plecos, so on all Siluriformes actually. It depends a bit on your point of view. So for me, Corridoras are catfish too, even if they don't have any like closer connection to the big predatory catfish. But yes, they are in the group of catfish. So it's not a scientific term, so it doesn't really have a definition which is internationally regarded as the only true definition.
Cool. All right. And while we're talking about cories, we can bring this comment up. They've got barbels and partly venomous spines, right? Isn't that just a catfish?
Yeah. That's what I was just saying, like basically, yes.
Yeah, cool. We've got another question from Mike. Do you have a theory or very insights on why the Hypancistrus zebra and why it has evolved with such patterns?
Well, I have a lot of theories, but and when was that? In 2014, I collected my first zebra plecos in Xingu, and believe it or not, but they were very, very difficult to see underwater. So, of course, like that black and white contrast for us, it seems like they should be very easy to spot underwater, but they're living not very close, depends on your view, but they're living pretty close to the surface of the water. So you can catch the first zebras in a depth of around 2 meters, 2 to 6 meters is where you normally find most zebra plecos. And in that depth of water, you still have the sun rays going into the water. And thanks to the waves of the Xingu surface, you have a very like wavy light atmosphere underwater. And it is very difficult to spot zebra plecos there. It is much easier, for example, to see L25, so the Canticus pirarara, even if they are brown. But they do have this catfish shape or pleco shape. And zebra plecos, thanks to their very high contrast, they match in very, very well in crevices and in the areas where you see light and black or dark stone. So I think that's in the end the reason why they have this unique pattern, and it is very successful. So, except of course, if some aquarists or some smugglers want to have it, then it's a bad trade. But before, it was very, very successful.
Cool. Very interesting. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face in your research?
In academic research, in Germany, it is definitely bureaucracy. So it can be very easy to get hyped on a specific topic or a specific species, and you want to get more into it. And you are also keen to invest days and months and sometimes years of your life to get more into this topic. But bureaucracy in Germany is just horrible. So it takes months and sometimes years to only get the permission to do something that you wanted to do for years already. That's really tough because you know, okay, I could start like right now, but I'm not allowed to. And I know that this is also a problem like in many other countries in Europe. It's much easier in the US, so they don't have the same strict animal rights, or rights don't have no the other way around. Animals don't have the same rights as in Germany. But yeah, that's probably the most trouble causing topic here. Otherwise, of course, you always have the research academic problem that if you see a structure, for example, that you don't know yet, you're always sitting in front of your screen and you're like, okay, what the hell is this structure for? And then you have theory one, theory two, theory four, and they all prove to be wrong within the next weeks. And sometimes you get some input from somebody not working with fish at all. For example, I've got a colleague and she's working with freshwater snails, and she saw pictures of my pictures of the teeth of plecos. And she was like, oh, that's just like in snails, and I know what they're used to, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what the hell? I'm working on these two pictures for 6 months now, and you just smashed all my theories. But yeah, so that's always very important, like to exchange with other scientists.
Yeah.
And in the field, for the research, it's also maybe bureaucracy, especially if you go to countries like Peru, Brazil. It's not easy to get the permission to catch fish, to transport fish, to take pictures of fish, sometimes to export fish. So you need a lot of preparation time. Like normally when I go for Bolivia, it takes a good year of preparation in advance to get all the permissions.
Cool.
So, but once you're there, or once you got the permission to work with the fish, be it in Germany or in Bolivia, it's always fun, and all the problems can be solved. But to be able to meet these problems is always the biggest problem, actually.
How do you decide on what species of fish that you want to work on?
Very similar to like in the beginning, it just happened. You know, you
Yeah.
always have that one topic where you wonder, so how do they do this? And why is it like that? Just like Mike asked, okay, why do zebra plecos look like they look? So and stuff like that. So I don't really have a list of topics that I want to work on, or lists of okay, like pros and cons. What could I do? I have so many projects in my head that I won't live long enough to work on all these projects and ideas. So
Yeah.
it's always things that I like, things that make me go, okay, why?
Yeah. Something just comes up and all of a sudden you're down a rabbit hole and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do it.
And we appreciate some people doing it. Can you share an interesting finding from some of your most recent work?
Well, that the most recent topic we're working on is what I mentioned about the oil disc and the like suction devices, we call it. Like, for example, that you can identify a species based on their unculi, based on their papilla surface, that stuff. That's what we're currently working on. Otherwise, of course, in the field, we're working more with new species. So we just submitted a paper of a new species 4 weeks ago, no, 5 weeks ago, maybe. And so I'm also into taxonomy a lot. And yeah, it's always great if you catch a fish and you can't really determine it, and nobody really can tell you what this fish is, or if this fish has been described already. And if you do have the location information and all the parameters and stuff, that's a lot of fun too. Like last year, for example, in Bolivia, we collected 3 new species, and they all look pretty boring. So none of them will make it into the hobby, and none of them will be a second zebra pleco, and nobody will pay big money for these fish. But they're new to science, and we now try to breed them. We try to spread them in the hobby. And then one day we hope that somebody, if not us, will give them a scientific name. So that's like the biggest findings you can have on a trip, of course.
Cool. Rebecca has also asked, where to go there? Is Bolivia easier on research permits?
No, absolutely not. No, Bolivia closed down totally to any like foreigner research projects in 2019. It was relatively easy to go there to catch fish and to work on fish in the country, of course, only before 2019. In 2018, for example, we made a trip with 5 guys, and it just went perfectly well. So we had everything well prepared, and we always face some problems. So you will never get into that perfectly working expedition, but everything was fine, and we could even take fish home. We, like, L519, for example, this Bolivian honeycomb ancestris. I know Becky knows it, and that was a beautiful fish we brought back. And the next year, Bolivia closed down because of some changes in their political system, and they closed down like entirely, totally. So that's why I said nowadays you need 1 year of preparation to get all the documents done and get all the paperwork done, only to enter a specific area of interest. Then you need another permission to catch fish, to transport fish, to take a picture of a fish. Last year, for example, we always had a guard next to us, and he was staring at us for days how we take pictures of fish. So it must have been absolutely boring for him. But his mission was he was a nice guy, so absolutely no problem with him on a personal basis. But he was just looking at us taking pictures of fish. And that was his mission. And he reported back to his boss. Okay, they are now taking pictures of fish over, again taking pictures of fish over. So it must have been boring for him. But there's always somebody who's having an eye on you in Bolivia.
Mm. Did you ask him if he was interested in fish keeping at all?
Well, he was like a guard of a national park, so he was interested in nature in general, but not as much in fish. So the thing is, if you go to like South America mainly, and you tell people I'm going to fish or I want to collect fish, they're like, oh yeah, sure. We can show you the biggest pacu, we can show you the biggest red-tailed catfish and all the big fish you want. And then you tell them, no, we want the tiny things. We want small tetras and mostly the boring looking fish, because spectacular fish have been discovered before in many cases, but the boring looking fish like the glass fish, the see-through species and stuff like that, they're still new to science. And if you tell people this and this is what we want, they're like, what? So you make fish soup or what? And we're like, no, we just want to take pictures. We want to study the fish. And they look at you like, well, that German guy's crazy. So he's going for the small fish and he doesn't even want to eat them. So it's difficult to interest local people in their fish if you don't tell them like the whole story, that they can earn some money with it, and that it's also considered a national treasure, and that it does have some value even if it is not on a barbecue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more questions coming through, so we'll get through them. Rebecca is essentially pleading, is the L514 going to get into the hobby?
Yeah, Yeah. Well, 514 is also living in a very remote place. There is a small village nearby, but you have to travel around, or let me think about around 12, 13, maybe 14 hours by car if you just go straight to this village. And then we only found this species in a very, very small area. We never collected many. I think the whole trip we collected like 17 or 18 specimens, and they proved to be very, very hard to survive. So they needed a lot of oxygen. And we brought some back to Germany, but they didn't make it to breeding age. Um, well, we do have the GPS location where to find them, but because it's so far at the moment, we're not planning, well, I'm not planning to go back there because I have different areas on my list first. But yes, it will definitely come again to the hobby, and it will also be described in the next years. So somebody's working on this species at the moment, and yeah, it's one of the most, for me, one of the most spectacular ancestors. Looks very similar to Ancestros ranunculus, so very flat, broad-headed, and very, very nice fish. Yeah.
Cool. Rochelle has asked, what can you tell us about the most commonly kept pleco, the bristlenose pleco? Are we opening up a can of worms with this question?
Yeah. There's so many things to talk about, like the most common pleco. What's maybe interesting? Maybe it is interesting. Well, for me, it is definitely interesting that even if it is such a common pleco, and I think everybody here or in this chat, I don't know who's listening, has kept the common bristlenose pleco, and still it has been in the hobby for I don't know how many generations, but still we do not know where it originally comes from. So we can only suspect that it's from southern South America, possibly Uruguay, Argentina, somewhere in this area. It's definitely not from the Amazon, from like central Amazonia, but it's impossible nowadays to track back the first specimens that were imported to the trade or into the hobby. So it is the most common pleco, the most common catfish in the hobby, and nobody can tell you where it's from. That fascinated me, at least, when I heard about it first.
Just on a side note, can you distinguish or determine where certain catfish or L numbers come from by particular characteristics on their body shape or their mouth shapes, or like, is there traits that come from some regions and not from others and that kind of thing, or they kind of all carry all the same?
Do you mean geography wise, or do you mean like habitat biotope types?
Geography wise, so like a flatter one comes from a more whatever region or what have you. No, but biotope wise, is that possible then?
Yeah, it is. It's mainly the biotope that you can tell, but it's impossible to tell if it's from, let's say, Amazonia or Paraná Basin or Orinoco Atabapo, the area. So there's no chance.
Okay. So biotope wise, what are some of the characteristics that you can pick out between different fish?
Well, biotope wise, it's mainly the current, the flow. So you get, of course, in a very strong flowing mountain creek, for example, you need different attachment advices on the oral suction disc, on the papilla of the mouth shape, than you need if you're living in a lake. For example, Pseudorhinelepis genibarbis, the pineapple pleco, L95. It's one of the very, very few species that doesn't live in real fast flowing lakes. It lives more in stuff like lagoons or dead arms of rivers. So where the current is very, very slow. And that's one of the few species where you can identify, or which you can identify with 100%, only looking at a microscopic picture of their suction devices. Because they are one of the very few species living in lake-like parameters and not facing a lot of current. They don't need much of an attachment or adhesion advice. All the others, like zebra pleco, for example, zebra pleco is again a bit unique, but it is unique in the genus anyway. But for example, if you compare 66 333 from Xingu, they do have almost the same mouth structures as the furunculus from the Orinoco Basin. So even if it's two different basins, two countries, a lot of distance between them, the suction device and the oral disc looks the same.
Cool. I'm loving that you're just rattling off names like it's just common talk.
I don't know all the English common names, so yeah, I can throw in German common names if that helps. But
Maybe not. We'll find out if you do it.
I doubt it.
Okay, so we've had another question from Mike. We've left this one to last because I think it might be slightly a bigger topic. Have you ever seen a parachirodon south of the Amazon? Heiko Blair claims to have discovered a fourth parachirodon in the Rio Peru's system. Are you familiar with that fish?
No to both. So I've never seen one of them south of the Amazon. I saw them in Colombia and in the Atabapo Basin, and of course also in the Rio Negro in Brazil, but never south of there. No, sorry.
Okay. Cool. Where am I here? You've done some work with planetcatfish.com. How long have you been involved with that website or organization, depending on which way you want to call it?
I think Planet Catfish, I think I started in 2003, maybe 2004, somewhere then when Planet Catfish still it still is, but back that day it was the best address ever to go to, with the internet and forums coming along and rising in importance. Planet Catfish was, of course, like the best resource to get international information from thousands of fish keepers, literally. And I started as a reader, of course, and I never knew if my English would be good enough to communicate with the people there. But then I was only 12 or 13 years old back that year when I started there. But afterwards, when I got more confident on my English, I also started to discuss with people, and it's very similar to the story I said about like writing articles, reading books. There are so many people working on this source of information, and nobody's earning anything with it. But people are just like giving their expertise and sharing all the knowledge that I just had to start too. And Jules is like the guy who's running Planet Catfish. He's always looking for nice articles, or he's running something like it's called Catfish of the Month. And it's just cool to see that every month, normally there's a new species being featured by somebody in the forum. So it can be somebody from New Zealand, somebody from Germany, Austria, wherever. And it's always a good read. So I decided, okay, I have to put on some of my pictures and get some articles published there too.
Back when I used to find Planet Catfish one of the most fascinating and interesting websites that was on the whole entire internet. Spent many hour just looking over it and reading it and just engrossing myself. The whole platform of it, the layout of it, the information on there is just phenomenal. So if you are a watcher at the moment or a listener on the podcast and you've never checked out Planet Catfish, it's well and truly worthwhile having a wee look and having a nosy through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like the fact that the layout isn't changing. So it still looks like it did 20 years ago, and I really like this. So in that way, I'm very conservative. So I want to keep it the way it used to be.
But if it's not broken, don't fix it. And it's not broken.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Planet Catfish. What type of content do you contribute to the website?
What type of content?
Yeah.
Well, mainly, it used to be pictures because of my traveling and my expeditions to Bolivia. Bolivia is not a country where many people go to because it is so difficult to travel there. So in some cases, I managed to get the first live photographs of some catfish. And when I saw that they were still missing on Planet Catfish, where it says, okay, no image available, I thought, well, you have one on your hard drive, so just send it to Jules and help everybody, because sometimes it's just one or two pictures and they can help a lot if somebody is maybe looking for this specific species. And many people don't tend to read scientific papers, so they need I don't know, 25 different species, but they need them on one screen in a good overview so that they can compare picture, picture, picture. And many people don't want to Google scientific papers and then they don't get permission to read them because they can't pay them. So some scientific papers cost up to $200, and it's useless if you want to only identify your fish. So it was pictures first, and afterwards, I started to write some articles, some short articles only for that catfish of the month, or like the last one was called Special Ancestors from Bolivia, something like that. Yeah, just to share some funny anecdotes, some funny adventures from the expeditions.
As a general hobbyist, I think there is a huge gap between scientific paper, which is obviously scientifically written, and then general taking the knowledge from that into a general, easy to read article. Mm-hmm. Something I learned or was told a long time ago while I was studying is that the lingo that you'll use in your profession isn't often translated into people that are not in there. How do you find writing different styles from like a scientific paper to one that the more general hobbyists are going to read? How do you sort of change that style when you're doing it?
Well, first, you're right that sometimes it is difficult to distinguish between both types. And no, I think like if you can say so, my natural intention to write is more for a hobbyist. So whenever I start writing a scientific paper, I just keep writing, 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 and then I leave it alone for a week, or maybe sometimes 2 weeks, and then I start reading again. And I normally delete everything because I then realize, okay, that was not, it wasn't bad, it wasn't wrong, but it was written with too much emotions, for example.
You're right.
And
Yep.
I used too many words to describe something which can be explained with 25 words less. So
Mm-hmm.
if you write a scientific paper, it has to be short. You have to be spot on, but it's not fun to write it, and it's also not fun to read it because you get one information, another information, and you just keep on getting informations. So when I write more like popular science articles or for our fish magazine, stuff like that, I always try to include, I hope it works, I try to include, you know, some funny parts too. So it's very easy if you write about expeditions because you have always so many mistakes happening and so many funny moments on every trip, and just include this so that it's also fun to read. So and because people read in their free time, so very few people are being paid for reading. So I try to make it as enjoyable for the person as possible. And I want the person to be like, oh, that's another article by Daniel. I'm reading this first because it's funny. It has information, so it is also carrying valuable information, I hope, but it's also a fun to read. So I like to sit down to read this. Scientific papers are normally like, okay, I have to open this PDF now, and then I have to read it because I need it for my research or for my bibliography. And it's not like, oh, that's a beautiful paper and it's so much fun to read it. I'll read it again.
Yeah.
So it's two different ways, but sometimes you can transmit the same information just for different people to read.
Cool. I'm going to bring up another question from Rebecca. I'm not even going to try and read out these words because I know that I can't straight away. If you would like to, that would be fantastic because I definitely can't.
Yeah. You want me to read it now?
Yeah, I'm not going to, no chance I'm going to be pronouncing any of these words correctly.
I'll give it a try.
Okay.
Interesting that Pseudorhinelepis genibarbus is unique. I assume different from other Rhinelepinae. Could you assess more basally branching taxa? Pseudancyssus genisetiga would be curious. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any individuals of the latter of the Pseudancistris species, but I think I think I know what you're up to because it's very unique even in this genus. So currently, it is placed in Pseudancistris, but among all the other species in the genus, it's very unique, and it doesn't seem to be a very good match for this genus. On the first question you had is yes, Guinea barbus is very different to all the others. We had Guinea barbis, and then we had the CF Guinea barbis in our latest study, which is also named like 152. Sometimes it's species Manaus, so it's like this black, brown, sometimes brown dotted species, and they are very, very similar, so almost the same. On the other hand, you've got Rhinelepis aspera, which is like a black species coming from the south of Brazil, from the Rio Paraná basin, and they look totally different. So the teeth structure is different, the unculi structure is different. They're in the same subfamily, but it seems that Rhinelepis is much older than Pseudorhinelepis, and they can be distinguished very, very easily looking at their oral suction disc hierarchy levels or surfaces.
Cool. Awesome. That went well and truly over my head, but that's awesome.
Yeah, well,
it's cool that the information like that just gets out into the general public and via writing, audio form, whatever it happens to be, information that's in and around people's head gets out to the world. I always think that's a fantastic thing.
Yeah. As we said before, like you always have so many different new aspects coming in, and there will always be that one moment when you think, okay, I don't know what he or she's talking about. But yeah, there's so much more, so much new stuff.
All right, something a little bit more low key from the chat is, why do plecos poop so much?
Well, there's also scientific explanation for this, but next time one of your plecos dies, like get yourself into the position and just open its belly, and you will see that the gut is very, very long. So plecos poop so much because plecos eat all day, and they have a very, very long gut, most species at least, especially the herbivorous species, so the ones being plant-based nutrition. And they eat all day, they digest all day, and they also have to poop all day.
Cool. Mike has asked, we follow-up question to this one that goes with it. Is there anything you can tell us about the plant Echinodorus zinguinus in the wild?
No, I have absolutely no clue about plants.
Cool. Yeah, so there was another wee follow-up to that, but that answers that one.
Yeah, nothing.
Cool. All right. So back to your work with Planet Catfish. Where am I at here? What's a typical day for you, sort of, when you're doing any sort of work or work on for that website?
What do you mean, like a typical day?
So like if you're sitting down to do some work or create some stuff for Planet Catfish, how does that sort of work for you?
Well, normally I don't have the plan to, like, okay, this week I have to do something for Planet Catfish, or I have to finish this article. Normally it's in my free time. So, for example, when I'm cycling, when I'm out cycling, I've got a lot of time to think about things and stuff, and fish it is in most cases. I'm just coming up with an idea in my head, and then it's like, well, then there's this, and then there's this, and then there's this other thing, and blah blah, and just thinking about it, and you suddenly have like a red line, we say, and you already have like an idea of what you can write about. But I don't like to start articles when I don't know how they finish or what they shall include. So before I normally write an article, I just think about what should be in there. Sometimes I make a small list, like you should include this fact or this thesis, like somebody discovering new species all day and wherever he travels and all that stuff. And then it's just once I'm starting, it normally takes me some hours depending on the length of the article. But normally it's 2-3 hours, and then the whole article is done. Not finished because it's still not perfect in the way I like it. But it's mostly at night, so I can work very, very well between 10-11 p.m. and the morning hours. So I just sit down at night and just keep writing off what I have already in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just happens. Sometimes I've got weeks where I don't write anything, and then sometimes I've got 1 week and I finish 5 or 6 articles. So it always depends a lot on what came to my mind first.
Other than the layout of Planet Catfish never changing, what's your favorite feature or section of that particular website?
There's one section which I enjoyed, especially when I was younger, very, very much. I think it's called Shane's World.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a guy obviously called Shane, and he started to write articles about his expeditions to Africa in many cases, to Colombia in some cases. And when I was younger, I loved reading those articles because it was like a window to another world. And I was, as I said, I was 12, 13, 14 years old, and there was somebody describing his weird expeditions and his observations in a different country. And I loved this very, very much. So that's probably my favorite section.
Cool. Another
Highly
question
recommend.
from another question. I also recommend that website if you haven't seen it before, definitely get amongst it. Another question from Mike. How common is it for you to catch a fish with damaged fins? Do you think that the ability for species to nibble on each other without causing death is a food survival trait that has been selected for?
No, I don't. Well, for the second question, I don't think so. The first question, it depends a lot when you go fishing. So normally, because I'm after catfish in most cases, I go there in the dry season. Then you have very, very little water. So even the big streams, they are decreasing drastically, and you can catch thousands, like literally thousands of fish in a small pond. And normally, in that case, you will have every fish with a damaged fin. In most cases, it's the caudal fin or the ventral fin that's damaged. But if you go to the same spot in rainy season when you have masses of water, of course, fish do have more space to swim, and the fish will look all perfectly fine. The problem is just that when you go there in the dry season, sorry, you always have predatory fish like hoplias, for example, and they just nibble on all the fish available, and that's why they're all like sometimes they're even rotten or they're with fungus already. But in many cases, it can be one or two predatory fish, hoplias or catoprion, for example, and of course Serrasalmos, Pygocentros, and they just bite into small parts of the fins. But in rainy season, fish will look almost perfectly fine. Most.
Right. This book here.
Yeah, beautiful book. Beautiful book.
Phenomenal book. Absolutely phenomenal book. You were involved in the editing of this book, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. What inspired you to edit it, basically? Where did that come from?
Well, it was my first book project. I think it was in 2012. Yeah. And well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm running a fish club, the BSSW in Germany. And once or twice a year, I try to order special books from other countries, which are not available here in Germany. So, and in 2012, I decided to order volume one of this book directly in Brazil. And I ordered, I think, 65 copies, and they arrived here in time and all that. But they were they were small and they were very thin, and there was a lot of information included, but it was all in Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
So most Germans don't speak Portuguese, unfortunately. So the idea was because Xingu was absolutely hyped back that time, and everybody was into Xingu, and Xingu was everywhere in every magazine and on every convention. Everybody was interested in Xingu River and the plecos there. And I only had 65 copies, I think, of the book, and they were sold out immediately, only among club members. And after a while, I figured, well, most people who bought the books, they can't even read them. So I thought, okay, we should maybe do an English version because people wrote me from England and from other countries. Well, we heard that you ordered this book and you sell them in Germany and stuff. I said, yeah, but they're all sold already. And yeah, so we decided together with Panterei, a former shop in Germany, that we actually need a second edition of this. And then we made it German English bilingual. We included many more photos, and we also added information that scientists back that day didn't know, but we as aquarists knew. And Well, I've got the book somewhere here. Yeah. So that's how the original book looked in the very
Oh
beginning.
wow.
So
Yep.
that's volume number one, and as you can see, it's not very thick. Yeah.
And that's that one.
So that's a big difference, right? So, but
Significant.
this book, this one already was great, but as I said, like nobody understood what was written in there. So we made it German English, and yeah, that was our first project. So we didn't get any money for this. It was just a project for fun. It took 1 year,
Yeah.
and we presented it at the Elnambe Days in Hanover in Germany. And that was a lot of fun.
I should have said the actual title of the book when we started talking about it. It's the Loricarides of the Middle Xingyu, Middle Rio Xingyu.
Exactly.
Beautiful book. So yeah, just showing it off is cool for the people that are watching, but for the people that are listening, who have no idea what we started talking about. So yeah. Can you share some highlights from the book?
Highlights. Wow, there are many highlights in there. What was my personal highlight? Well, of course, because it was my first book project in general, it was cool to have pictures published in the book, like on like a personal highlight. But maybe the highlight for me about this book was that we started cooperating with scientists. So on first grade, of course, we started working together with the scientists that were publishing volume number one. But to get more information and to get more decent, more detailed information, especially, we started to work with other scientists too from whole Brazil. And we suddenly had a very, very nice conversation going on, like almost on a daily basis via email. And we had a huge group of people, and we were always chatting. And what do you think about this species? And how about this species? And do you think that this is right? And adding information, as I said, from the hobby. And sometimes scientists were like, "Wow, we didn't know this." And talking about zebra or in general Hypancistris, for example. When I went there in 2014, which was 1 year after we published volume number two, most scientists still believed that it wouldn't be possible to breed Hypancistris. So we told them about eggs and egg sizes and the clutch size, how many eggs do they lay, and how many days does it take for the juveniles or for the larvae to hatch. And so in this exchange was just phenomenal for us because they suddenly knew, wow, actually Hypancistris zebra is very easy to breed. And they never achieved this before. Now they're breeding them, like Leandro Sousa, he's doing a great job, and he's breeding all these fish. And on the other side, we got all the information, for example, about Pseudacanthus pirara, the L25, the red tail cactus pleco, something like that.
Mhm.
Nobody in the hobby knew that they feed on freshwater sponges. And then we went there, and Leandro knew it for years already. And he was, yeah, of course they eat freshwater sponges. And in the hobby, we didn't know that. And well, yeah, stuff like this was for us very much opened with the editing of this book.
Cool. Fantastic. What was the most challenging part of the editing process?
I think it might have been the well, how do you say that? Like in the end, when you think everything is complete and everything is as good as it is possible to make, you need you need to be brave enough to say, okay, project finished, send it to the printer. And this took us weeks, and we started to read it again and read it again and read it again. We sent it to some friends, the manuscript, and they were supposed to read it. And everybody always found a mistake, always. So we said, okay, we'll give it another read, and people need to read it again because we wanted to have this perfect book, which is impossible, I think. So, but then there was this one day where we said, okay, we have to print it now if we want to present it on the International Alnambe Days. I think we printed it 4 or 5 days before, and then it was
Oh wow.
express printing. So we really took like until the very last minute. And when the books were delivered right to the hotel where the convention took place, we just looked into the book, and within seconds we found a huge mistake
Oh
because
no.
I don't know on which page it is. You might have seen it. there's one picture which still carries the image file name. So it's not coming with the scientific name of the fish, but it says IMG 6385 or something like that. And it took us 10 seconds to realize this huge mistake after reading the book for 25 times. And everything was perfectly fine, but this one image file name. So that was hard for us, but it was also very, very funny because it was
Yeah,
done
yeah,
anyway. We couldn't change anything about it.
yeah. Mistakes happen, and it's part and parcel of life. It is what it is.
Yeah.
In the coin collecting world, mistakes on coins make them more valuable. So you can just put that as a more valuable edition of a book.
Agree. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
good tip. I might sell mine now tomorrow on Facebook. We'll see.
How did you select the contributors for the book, or how did that whole process come about, and who was involved with the book?
Well, basically, there were two persons involved. I was in charge of all the texts and the pictures and getting all the texts done, let's say all the editorial work. And then there was a friend of mine, Andreas Tanke. He's still working and he's still publishing books. He just published a huge book about Channa snakeheads,
Mm-hmm.
and he was in charge of the whole layout stuff. So I tried to get Leandro Sousa, for example, to write 2 articles for us. I tried to collect all the pictures. I wrote all the German texts and translated. And yeah, as I said, did all the editorial stuff. And then it was Andy's mission to choose a very nice layout for us. And I think he did. So the book looks well, I think it still looks very nice. It still looks very modern. Uh, great pictures in most cases on a black background. So basically, it was us two, and then we had another friend included in the end. When what I just said, we needed somebody else to proofread. So and then we took another friend, Christian Kramer. He also worked with Leandro in Brazil before, so he knew exactly what we were talking about. And that was our team. Yeah.
Cool, cool. What do you hope readers will take away from that book?
Well, the book was one of our intentions was to show the diversity in only a small section of the Xingu River. So Xingu River itself, of course, is immense, and we are only talking about the middle part, which is the Volta Ganji, for example, close to the city or close to the town of Altamira. And we tried to show that many of these species are now in danger because of the dam that was being built back at the time. So we already knew that one day it would be finished and then one day it would go into action. But so far, when we published the book, nature was still fine and the fish were not in problems yet. And we tried to like put an eye on the species and on the dangers and on the risks that might face the middle part of the Xingu in the future. So that's 10 years ago now. And many of the things that we predicted or that were predicted also by other scientists that we published in the book did happen. Some didn't. Some of our theories were totally wrong. But yeah, some took place, unfortunately.
Oh, fantastic. We've had a few more questions come up from this. I'll bring up Mike in. Can you talk about the rainfall patterns in the middle Xingu? Does it rain daily, short, long durations, heavy, light storms, not at all for months of the year? And what effects does this have on fish?
Yeah, I like how Mike puts 6 questions in one question. No, it does not rain every day. It depends a little bit on the season too. So even though that the climate is pretty stable, you don't have rain every day. For example, my first time there was in, let me know, September, and it was raining. It wasn't raining for 2 weeks, and the third week was only rain. And of course, like one of the main things that's changing for the fish living in Xingu River is that the more rain you get, obviously the more water you have. So the water is getting a bit more turbid. It's getting a bit um, yeah dirtier. So even though the water itself isn't dirty, so the water quality is still great, but because of the running water and because you have water coming from the forest and from the area surrounding the river, it gets a little bit more cloudy. Yeah, cloudy is a better word. It's not dirty, cloudy. And fish, of course, they do have way more room to go to. For example, the pacu is a great example, or there's a woodcat catfish. It's called Tucantinsia piresi. So it looks like, yeah, a piece of wood, which is also dead. So it's very boring if you only look at it. But they suddenly start to eat fruit. In dry season, or when it's not raining, they feed on mollusks, on insect larvae, on dead fish. So they're mainly eating carnivorous. But once the rainy season starts, you also have a lot of fruits dropping into the water. And then suddenly you have a predatory catfish, which you would never think to eat fruits, and they're only going for the fruits. So
Wow.
this is, of course, like, but it's a very good example of how things change within the year. Same for the pacu. Everybody knows the huge teeth of a pacu, and they use them to crack open big fruits, which is only possible in the right season.
Wow. Cool. Rebecca has now said, sponges is interesting. A shame it is not in the literature as far as I can find. Do they digest sponges do loricates digest wood? Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar to the wood. So they don't digest the sponge organism itself, but by scraping off the sponge, of course, they also eat the microfilm attached to the sponge and to the whole stone or the structure where that sponge is living on. So the organism of the sponge itself is apparently, I have to say, of no value, but it's more of the surrounding microfilm habitat, the bacterial film, which is coming, yeah, with the sponges. There was one bachelor student a few years ago who was working on this, and they also made isotope analysis. I don't know if it was ever published, but there should be at least like an attempt to have something like it published. And as far as I know, it's only known from Pseudacanthus and Megalancistrus. So in other genera, it hasn't been proven yet.
Cool. Right, sorry, I was just replying to someone in the chat. Can you describe a memorable field experience that you've been on?
Well, there were many. There's one. Does it have to be a scientific experience, or can it be funny?
Any experience is fine.
Okay. So let's go with the L519 I mentioned before. We discovered L519 in 2018 on a trip. And normally I do plan the trips also with maps and Google Maps, Google Earth. And I had 17 locations where I wanted to fish. And so we hopped from location 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And we tried to not stop in between, except if it was a place that looked to be very, very promising. And on one day like this, we had a Bolivian friend with us. And I brought some, how's that called? So it's like small tablet stuff, and it promises you to give you vitamin C, for example, or calcium, and you put it into normal water, and then you get a taste. Normally, it's a fresh taste like orange, or you get banana too, and stuff like that. But you have to be used to this drink, to this tablet drink. And he wasn't used to it, but he loved it very much. And he said, "Well, Daniel, can I have another bottle?" I said, "Oh, of course, here, please go ahead." I didn't think about it. And half an hour later, he said, "Well, Daniel, do you still have this special drink you brought from Germany?" I said, "Yeah, of course you can have it." And then I started to think about it. Well, he had 3 bottles, each a liter, and he finished 3 of them within like close to 1 hour. So his body can't handle this, I'm sure, because your whole digestion system is like totally overloaded with this stuff if you're not used to it. And yeah, 10 minutes afterwards, he said, Daniel, we really need to stop. We have to stop. I'm exploding here." I said, "Well, yeah, I can imagine because you had 3 bottles of this." So we stopped, and he just took one of those toilet paper rolls and ran away into the bushes. And we thought, well, he will be back in 5 minutes. He didn't came back after 5. He didn't come back after 10, 15, 20. He disappeared to the woods. But we could sometimes hear him doing things. And so we decided, okay, let's just go for a fishing. So if he's working in the bushes and trying to get his digestion system working again, we can use the time to fish. And after 2 minutes, a friend of mine had the first L519 in his hands. And this is how we discovered this beautiful ancestral species. We
Wow.
were never meant to stop there. So if
Wow.
my plan would have worked, we would have skipped that location and we wouldn't have found L519. Thanks to him drinking all our water thing and getting very, very bad on this. And it took him almost 4 days to feel better afterwards. So he was very, very bad. But we
But
were
worth it.
totally happy because thanks to him, we found this very, very beautiful species.
Wow. That is a very cool story. And yeah, it's just incredible how sometimes things just work out the way they work out.
But it's always like this. So if you have a perfectly planned plan, just skip it. It won't work anyway. And you just have to deal every day, you have to deal with what's coming. So and it's always good because most places are still full of new discoveries and full of new things that you haven't seen before. And even if everybody else in the world, let's assume, has seen this fish or has seen this insect, if you haven't seen it yourself, it's still something new, right? And it still has a lot of value. So just take every day as it comes and try to make the best of it. And so far, I cannot say that I have had a trip which was bad or not successful.
Cool. Rebecca has brought something up that a new common name for the L519 is needed.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah. I think there was a name I read on the list. It was Bolivian super honeycomb, something like that, which is great. Yeah. The very first common name was bullshit, and we're now trying to get rid of this bullshit name.
Right. So, do you know much about otocinclus? Because Zen would like to know what's the best way of keeping them alive? Because a lot of people do struggle with keeping otocinclus alive. Is there particular
Yeah.
foods or environments to keep them as the best way for that?
Yeah. In my sorry, in my experience, it's the environment. So if you're even the most difficult species like Rhinotocinklus from Peru, Isabelle, or Paratocinklus britski, so they're very, very sensitive fish. And if you want to keep them, you need to prepare a tank which looks dirty. So you need a lot of algae. You need clean, but it can be old water, and you just need a lot of surfaces which are covered in biofilm and in algae and stuff like that. So if you have a clean tank, it might look nice, and to me, it always looks like a hospital room. But if you have a dirty looking tank, but which is totally fine considering the water parameters, then you won't have any problems with otocinclus and all the others. But you need to give them right on day number one. You need to give them a very, very well cycled tank with a lot of biofilm. Aufwuchs, we say in German. I think it's almost an English word now. That's what they need. And if you don't know how to achieve this, try to put some flat stones in a second tank, like only or a glass, whatever, some container that holds water. Put it outside in the sun or close to a window that gets very, very strong sunlight. And then after 5, 6, 7 days, depending on the light, you will have some algae growing on the stone. And that's perfect food. So you don't need fancy live food or fancy tablets or fancy granule food. Just make them feed on the natural resources that they also have in nature. If you collect otocinclus in the wild, you don't find them in the clean places, like where you find Hypanthus zebra, for example. You normally find them in the grasslands or on branches, which are totally covered in a biofilm, and that's what they need. Also, another problem is that, as I said earlier, Otocinclus, they are herbivorous species and they have a very, very long gut system. So the whole digestion system it's immense for such a small fish, and they need food every day. And the problem is that many times if they get collected first, of course, and then they're sitting somewhere, maybe let's say for 4 or 5 days at the fisher's location. Maybe he feeds them, maybe he doesn't. So that's 5 days without food. If they get sent to, let's say, Bogota, to Manaus, to the exporter, they might sit another 4 or 5 days. And if they don't get food for 8 to 10 days, they're dead already. So they arrive alive in Germany or in New Zealand or wherever, and they might do it for another 2 or 3 weeks, but they are practically dead already because they couldn't fill their digestion system for 8 to 10 days. Let's assume so, and then that's enough already, and you will never be able to make these individuals recover. So buy them as early as possible and just give them all the kind of branches and leaves. Like in Germany, we like to give them walnut leaves, for
Mhm.
example, or just as I said, stones from the window, stones from ponds. Perfect. So if you've got a pond, put some flat stones out there in the pond, place them in your tank, and you will see how all the otocingus gather on the flat stones to feed. And then they're actually easy to keep.
It's from what I've taken from that and from talking to other people, it's purely the feeding that becomes the issue with them, or for the best part. And
Yeah.
like you just said, they eat every day, and if they've gone a week without it at a wholesaler or a transshipper or whatever, empties them out, and there's your struggle. So as long as they're getting fed and still eating, you're 3/4 of the way through the battle. That's about right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know about the exporters from Colombia, at least. They started to feed them now, also in their installations. They didn't do so before COVID, but during COVID, when they were literally sitting on their stock, they started to feed them, and they realized, well, interesting, because suddenly the difficult species they survive much longer. But it just makes sense, even if it's a fish and it can't scream very well like we do, but we would never ever think about like not feeding a guinea pig or not feeding your hamster pet for 8 days. And in fish, it's
Yeah,
like,
correct.
well, it's still swimming, so it should be okay, shouldn't it? And catfish in specific maybe have a problem because many people still regard them as cleaner fish, so no special food needed anyway. And yeah, but it is getting much better.
Yeah, that's you bring up again a really good point there. People consider catfish as cleaner fish, don't need to feed them, they'll just eat everything that's hanging around. The reality is that they're a living animal and they need to be fed. There might be a whole
Yeah,
bunch of algae or what have you in your tank, but within a couple of days that's gone, then they're going to starve. You've got to put food in the tanks with them.
yeah, that's it.
Cool. What are the unique challenges when discovering and describing dimorphic species accurately?
Well, I think, well, one of the main challenge, or one of the problem, is to get hands on all the comparative material. So this can be very difficult. Like in the case I mentioned before, the species we just recently submitted, it's a member of a rather big genus. And there are many similar species, of course, and it can be very difficult to get your hands on those specimens, be it for the measurements or for just like to have a look at, to describe the color in alcohol, to describe the color in life. You know they exist. Many of them exist in London, some in Sao Paulo, and some in Lima, for example. But somebody has to travel there to take the measurements. In some cases, it's easier because somebody else did so already, and the data are available. In some cases, okay, there is a holotype, and there is maybe a second, like a paratype somewhere, but nobody really knows anything about this fish. And then you need the data of this specific fish to compare it to yours, even if you know already that it will be different. Of course, for a comparison, you need data to compare it to. And it's very time consuming to locate and then to find the time to do all the measurements. That was a big problem for us. But we were lucky in the end. So we just traveled to Brazil and to Bolivia and to London, and we had some friends helping us. So we got all the data that we needed.
Cool. What are some unique challenges of conducting field research on catfish?
Unique challenges. Yeah, I think it's very similar to like other types of fish, actually, the challenges. Of course, it's you need a specific number of specimens for a fish, like the L415 that Rebecca asked earlier about. It's definitely a new species, so that's 100%. And it would have been very easy to describe it, but we didn't collect enough. So normally in science, you say you need about 30 specimens of a species to describe it as a new species, because you need to get to know the specific traits of each species. And if you collect two or three, you might be ending up with two or three very, very uniquely colored or very, very special colored fish, but you don't get like the real picture of the species. And we would have loved to get more of the L514, but we didn't catch enough of them, so we were not able to describe it. If we would have collected, let's say, 30, 35, it would have had a scientific name already. So that's one of the big problems, especially when you don't know anything about the fish yet. Sometimes they are only active at night, for example, and you collect two or three at daytime, and you think, wow, that species is very, very difficult to catch and it's very rare. So we won't even try to get more. And if you catch at the same place at night, your net is just full of this fish, and it can just be like 6 hours later. But you have to know it first, or you have to try it at least. And to try, you need to invest a lot of time again. So that's one of the problems. Maybe it's more specific about catfish because they tend to be more different in behavior at day and nighttime. For example, if you collect the neon tetras parahyorodon in Colombia, you get the same amount at day and nighttime in Rio Atabapo Basin. So they're very easy to catch. Or altum angelfish in general. They sleep at night and you can just pick them out of the water like collecting strawberries.
No way. Have you ever considered, like, you've found some fish, discovered some fish that this could be the only small population that exists in the wild, or has that never kind of been a mindset?
Yeah, that's actually one specific species. It's Corridoras, undescribed species CW153. So it's a cory that looks very much like an Aspidoras. It's from lineage 5, and we know that it only has a very, like, really very, very small distributional range. It is about 3 to 4 kilometers of a small
Wow.
creek in Bolivia. And I'm traveling to this specific creek for 9 years now in a row, and we never managed to collect more than 51 specimens. So
Wow.
one year we went to that creek 5 times, spent there 5 days, and we collected well, those 51 specimens in 5 days. And depending on the season you go there, you don't get a single specimen. So we tried to sample the whole little creek. The problem is that it runs right between two huge fields of soy, and it's just very, very likely that in the next years it will be disappearing.
Yeah. What do you think is causing that kind of? Do you think it's like different plantations coming through, natural reasons? Something's happened way up the line that's caused the effects all the way down. What do you think often causes that kind of decrease?
Well, in this specific case, it will be agriculture,
Yeah.
because agriculture is well, everybody knows it's growing faster than we can actually observe or than we can like notice it. And there is so many poisons and toxic traits being put on fields that especially water organisms are, well, they're not looking into a very bright future in many areas. And if you look at Mato Grosso in Brazil, south west of Brazil, it's an area where the soy started 25 years ago, roughly, and they started to plant the first soy fields. And that's a very, very good example because Paraguay, Argentina, Bolivia, they all started a little bit later. And right now, it still looks like nature and it still looks like the forests. They're so huge that nothing can destroy them. But if you look at Mato Grosso in Brazil, then you know exactly how it will look in Bolivia too in a few years of time, because it's just everything is being destroyed, and soy fields are sometimes larger than you can cross in a single day by car. So you just go through
Wow.
fields and fields and fields and fields, and I normally take a drone with me to spot some water bodies, like especially when we are after killifish. Then it's very easy to bring up your drone, and then you can spot small ponds and stuff in the forest. And sometimes it's sad because you go up to 6, 7, 800 meters and you don't see a single tree. It's only field and agriculture.
Wow.
There will be many species, especially those smaller ones like small cories and small tetras. I think many of them will disappear because they
Yeah.
only have small distributional ranges.
Yeah. Wow. It's unfortunate, but that is just how life works, really. Unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. At the moment, that's it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Zen has asked something like a bacteria AE help to create extra biofilm, and this is in relation to the autosynclus feeding.
Yeah. I don't know that product, Bacteria IE help, but if it is something to start cycling your tank, which I'm assuming now, then it doesn't help too much because those bacteria are mainly working in the filter. So as I said, the best thing really is if you want this biofilm, make it as natural as you can. Just take a big container, put it on your close to your window, make sure it gets a lot of sun, and wait a week, wait 5, 6 days, and you will have exactly the biofilm that you need. And if you have like a big window and a lot of space for this container, put in 10 stones and you can always exchange five. Like every week, maybe depending on the size of the tank and on the size of the group of autocyclists you keep. Just exchange all the stones on a 5, 6 day basis and your fish will be happy. And they will also breed. So most people that keep autocyclus or paraautocyclus correctly are just being confronted with juveniles after a while. So you don't even have to trigger them in some way. Just keep them well, and they will regard you with some eggs.
Cool. Is there any apex predator bird in the middle Xingu system that affects the fish, or are the rapids protecting against birds?
Well, there are some species like herons, and then there is that black guy. Give me a second. Oh, okay. It's called the sea raven or great cormorant. So it's not this species in particular, but it's a very similar, slightly smaller species living in Brazil, and they eat a lot of catfish too. Especially, they prefer pims normally, so like Pimelodus, Pimelodella, those predatory catfish. But I doubt that there is a bird who really has an effect on the populations of plecos.
How do you prepare for your field expeditions?
Sorry.
How do you prepare yourself for your field expeditions?
Well, the biggest or the most important preparation really is to get all the documents done because I
Mhm.
also have people like relying on me whenever I ask friends, okay, I have this field trip planned. Do you want to come? Then they only say yes and they book their flight. But it's always on me to get all the organization done in advance to the trip, and that's the most important. Otherwise, just yeah, I've got a packing list with all the camera equipment and all the also some sort of medicine you need to take, of course. And yeah, but it's easy packing then. It's just like packing for a normal trip, except all the camera equipment, all the photography equipment for like different photo tanks. I always bring three photo tanks. Then you bring all the equipment you need to conserve fish samples, all the scissors and knives and alcohol, of course, formaldehyde, all that stuff. Yeah, but once you're in the plane, it's always a big relief because you can't change anything anymore, and it's done then, and then you can just have a beer in the plane and wait for for the weather to be good, for the police to be nice, for all the guards in the national parks to help you, or at least not to stop you. Yeah. Photography is maybe the most important part. So all the planning of the bureaucracy first, and then the photography, because even if you're not allowed to take fish home, you will always have the pictures. And that's what counts in the end.
I think my computer's having a wee bit of a minor spasm, so hopefully it just doesn't abruptly stop. If it does, I apologize. Have you had any close calls or dangerous encounters during your research on field trips?
In 2015, on one of my first trips to Bolivia, I got dengue fever, which wasn't very nice. So we were out fishing, of course, and I saw this huge mosquito, black and white, sitting on my arm. And back that day, I didn't know about dengue fever, not about the big, how they called Asian tiger mosquito, something like that. And I just thought, well, that's a nice mosquito. I'll take a picture of it. So I
Yeah.
took a picture of the mosquito. Just in the moment it stung me. And 2 days later, I was in bed and I was cold and hot at the same time. And for a good week, I was very, very sick, but I survived, and that was good in the end. And a few years later, I got dengue fever a second time. And I went to the doctor and said, well, I think I got dengue fever again. And he said, well, what do you mean, like again? I said, well, I had it 3 years ago already. And back that day, there was no vaccine against it. And he was like, well, if you got it twice now, then you have to be really, really careful, because normally if you get it 3 times, it will also be the last time you get it. So that was like one
Wow.
of those moments when I felt, well, not too bad now. That's a nice experience. But there's a vaccine now against it. So I'm optimistic going into the next field trip.
Yeah. Fingers crossed,
But
not again.
yeah, exactly. But we never
Yeah.
lost somebody on the trip, so there was never any serious injuries so far. There's always some small stuff, of course, so but nothing too bad. Nobody ever got bitten by a caiman or no.
That's a
I was
bonus.
once stopped by police and put in prison for 45 minutes. It wasn't really dangerous, but it was also a good story to tell afterwards. So they didn't like my last name, I think, because it sounded too German, Konfetterlein,
Hmm.
and they didn't want to believe my story. So they said, "Okay, you have to go to prison now." And in the end, they only wanted money. So they were offering me like, "Well, you could buy your own liberty, and if you want to pay us, you can do this, and then you can leave." But because I was living with my Bolivian family, I knew about those stories. And I was just like sitting there and I was like, okay, I've got time, so it's no problem for me. And after 45 minutes, they were sick of me and they said, okay, just leave, go, go. So there's always some stories. Huh? Or in 2000, last story, in 2018, we had to cross a military control, and people in the village before, they were like, oh, you're all gringos and you all look so blonde and German, and they will never ever let you pass. And we were like, okay, what can we do? So maybe we should leave the river before and then walk through the jungle and meet our boat later on the river to avoid this control. So we're thinking and thinking and thinking, but there was no way to do this because it would have looked very, very suspicious if they would have caught us. And it was also too difficult because of all the equipment. So we said, okay, let's just go straight to the control, and I will speak to the officer. And it turned out that the officer was 2 years younger than I was, and he was very friendly. And I said, well, you look like you could have a beer now, and we were just going to have a beer. If you want to join us, and we'll all have a beer together. He was very happy. We invited him for a beer, and we had a great night. He called all his friends over. We invited the whole military group for a beer. We spent the night together, drinking all the beer they had in the village. And next day, they were doing the formal important control, and they were just saying, okay, goodbye, friends, good luck, friends, and see you later, friends. And it was one of the best nights of the whole trip. But people
Nice.
before, they were like, oh, they will not leave you, and they will stop you, and you will not be allowed. And we were very like frustrated. But in the end, everything was perfectly fine, and we had a great night.
Nice one. Cool. Uh, do you examine the stomach contents in the field? And if so, what's the most surprising thing you've found?
We do so sometimes, but doing it in the field is very difficult because you don't have the time mainly to focus on so many different stomach contents. So what we sometimes do is if we have big specimens, we open them up and we just try to get a small overview of what species they feed on. But normally, if I'm like really seriously interested in the stomach content, I preserve the whole fish and then I do it at home because then I have the time and I can focus really on each stomach separately. I can do the isotope analysis and stuff like that. But we once had a finding where we were presented with 60 centimeter or 61 centimeters Megalodoras evini, like a huge thorny cat catfish, big fish, really 61 centimeters. And we thought, well, that fish is so fat, it's immense, it has to be female. And we thought it would be full of eggs. So we started cutting its belly, and then suddenly we didn't see a single egg, but we saw all nematode parasites. And the belly was open, and suddenly there were like literally hundreds of worms or nematodes coming out of that belly. And
Wow.
the whole belly was full of spaghetti looking like worms. And it was, first of all, it was very ugly. But afterwards, once all the worms were burned, because we had to burn them, it was very, very ugly, really. I conserved a few. I still have them somewhere here on the shelf. We also found snails and mussels in the stomach, and it was known before that thorny catfish eat mollusks, but it was very difficult to tell which species. And just by coincidence, out of luck, we actually made a very nice listing of what species Megalodoros irvini feeds on. And we got some fantastic pictures. I- I'd, I'd love to share some pictures. I don't know if it's possible, though. Well, it's not a nice picture, but it's a very ugly picture, which looks cool. I don't know how it's working. Maybe I can send it to you later, and then you
Yeah.
can post it somewhere.
Yeah, that'll be cool if we can do that. It'll be fine.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's maybe
What,
easiest way.
what role do catfish play in their ecosystems?
Well, many of the typical catfish, like the ones with a big mouth and barbels and stuff, they have something that you can consider as like a tidying police group, we would say in German. So of course they do feed a lot on dead fish too. They tidy up the bottom, you could
Mhm.
say, but it's not like they are cleaners as they're being sold as in pet shops. Some are very, very specialized in their nutrition needs, but it really depends on the species itself. So it's very difficult to give like one answer for all of them.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. What do you think the biggest threats to catfish populations are today?
Biggest threats. Well, for many migratory species like the big Pimelodus or Pseudoplatystoma, Brachyplatystoma, and so on, it's definitely the hydroelectric dams like Bilomonchi, for example, on Rio Xingu. It's a huge risk, a huge threat. But the problem is that we only know or we only talk about Belo Monte in Brazil. And there are currently, I think, 151 different construction sites where dams are being built in South America. And of course, they're normally built on the big rivers. And all those migration routes of the big PIMS, they're being stopped, they're being halved. So they don't reach their spawning areas anymore. And within the next 20, 25 years, some species might maybe not disappear, but they will definitely decline in their population.
Hmm.
For smaller fish, like if you consider Parotocinclus, for example, in the east of Brazil, they live in small, very shallow, but very, very clean creeks only. So they don't even go into the big streams. And the smaller such a biotope, the smaller such a little creek is or a stream, of course, the higher the risk that only like one single agriculture failure can lead to the extinction of a whole species in such a river. Or in 2000, when was that? 2017, when that dam of the mine collapsed in South Brazil. There were species like Scleromistax prionotus, for example, and they were thought to be extinct for a while because when that dam collapsed and all the toxic water was released to the main river, it was thought that the whole distribution range was covered with toxic mud. And some years afterwards, it turned out there were other streams where that Scleromistax used to live in, but most of the population was just wiped out in a day.
Wow. Yep. Are you involved in any conservation projects?
Yeah, some. We do have some like not official projects running here. So that's like if, especially about all the like expensive placos, sometimes it's not possible to buy a group. So you buy
Mm-hmm.
only one, and a friend says, okay, I buy one too. And then you have five friends and everybody buys one. So, but that's private conservation projects. I'm
Yeah.
working on some, I'm a member of some conservation projects with live bearers and some typical tetras too that we collected first and then we bring them home, bring them to Germany, Austria, England. But I'm not really like working on the breeding of a specific species that I didn't collect myself. No.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. You mentioned before you had 15 or 16 aquariums at home. What species of catfish are you currently keeping?
Uh, Most of them, well, for me, it's important that most of them are self-collected. So most of them are from Bolivia. I am in love with woodcats at the moment. So I've got a lot of Tucantinsia, or well, a lot. I've got four, but four is quite a lot if you consider how rare this species is. Also, another tank goes to, the gulper catfish, Asterophysus batrachus. Now I've got two tanks of this actually, and another tank, of course, for the Acanthus adonis. And then I've got plenty of smaller tetra species living together with Corridoras.
Mm-hmm.
Just I love do you know the zombie pleco L70? They are they are
Yep.
boring actually. They're like dark gray black. I've got three tanks of L70 because nobody wants to keep them. So whenever I see some, I'm like, okay, do you like this fish? Do you breed it? And people are, no, I don't like it, but nobody wants it. And I say, okay, give it to me. And I build up a new group. So I breed this fish and I try to spread it, which is very difficult because it looks so boring. Then I've got some Rhinelepis. They are also not looking very nice, but they're just stunning and they're absolutely unique in their appearance. They're the only species that are known to scatter their eggs, so they don't go into caves like Hyphanthus zebra does. They
Oh, wow.
scatter thousands and thousands of eggs in the current, and they don't take care of them. So it's the first species we know this about so far.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah.
So my tanks
Uh,
they're all filled with fish, but they're all boring fish for most people. And they're not pretty fish, but it's cool fish and fish I can still learn something from.
hmm, hmm. What advice can you give people that are wanting to get into keeping catfish?
What advice? Yeah. Well, maybe to start with a species that you can breed, because I noticed for myself that there was a while when I only kept species that haven't been bred before. And after 2, 3 years of keeping fish without a single breeding success, you tend to ask yourself a bit like, well, does this make sense at all? Because I'm only observing and I'm feeding and I'm spending, but I don't get any juveniles back. So I started to keep easier fish again, some species that, might be known better or that might be more like better spread already in the hobby. But getting some youngsters from time to time is quite, it just makes you feel better. So that would be one advice. So don't concentrate too much on the difficult fish. Don't concentrate too much on the hyped fish, which is most expensive. Also,
Hmm.
it's if you once have a fish and or a species and it breeds for you, just keep breeding it. Because I don't like people that buy a group of fish, they breed them, and then they're like, okay, now it's boring because I bred it. And so many species are disappearing again from the hobby because they're easier to breed. And many people are like, oh, that's not a challenge for me anymore. And after a few years, that species is gone. So
Mm.
just breed the same species over a while and don't try to breed as many as possible. Just dedicate yourself maybe to a fewer species, but breed them on a constant basis. That would be
You've
it.
mentioned a couple of websites already as far as good resources. Is there any other resources you'd like to tell people about when it comes to researching about catfish?
Well, from hobbyist view, I'd say Planet Catfish is the best. Then there is, well, if you know German or if you have a good translation system, it's the that page elvels.com.
Mm-hmm.
It only has cories and plecos, but the articles are very, very detailed, and you get very, very detailed information about breeding and ecology, and also sometimes all that's known from science. Otherwise, of course, if you're more into the scientific part of it, I very often use Catalog of Fishes from or by Eschmeyer. It doesn't bring any information itself, but it always brings about if it is a well-known species, you always get at least 3, 4, 5 links to papers. So you don't have to Google for every single paper, but you get like a list. Okay, these papers are connected to the species you're looking for, and you might find these papers interesting.
Sure. Cool. Do you have any new publications or books or anything like that coming out in the future?
Well, I just had a publication about Pimelodus in Practical Fish Keeping magazine. That's like last week or 2 weeks ago, I think. Currently, we're working on some new ELD numbers for the Dutch magazine, also for a German magazine. I'm also working on a book, but this book will not be out in the next 2 or 3 years. So it's about all the Bolivian freshwater fish. So
Mm-hmm.
it covers close to 1,000 species, and my
Wow.
aim is to show as many of them as possible in good pictures, because many are not known yet in live pictures and only exist in like from dead pictures. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going to Bolivia again and again to cover all the different areas to get as many species photographed as possible.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, otherwise, like of course, like all the typical articles coming out, yeah, but it's about plecos. There will be something in the how's it called? Yeah, Dats and Amazonas magazine about the diversity of catfish families and new cories from Colombia. Yeah, always busy.
Cool. Mike would like to know, what is your fish keeping philosophy in terms of setups that most people are not doing or possibly doing wrong?
Mhm. Um, so I think regarding to the setups of the aquarium of the tank, right?
That's why I've taken that. Yeah, yeah.
Well, my philosophy is that the tank doesn't have to look beautiful. It doesn't have to look nice, as long as it's practical and well, fitting the needs of the species you keep. For example, in all my pleco tanks, I don't keep any plants. As I said earlier, I have no clue about plants. I've got some, but I couldn't even name them on species level. Because once you go to the biotopes, you will find that our tanks are very clean and they are made for us mainly. Of course, a tank in the living room has to look nice somehow, because it also is kind of a decoration in the room. But if you only look at the fish, like zebra plecos, for example, they live only among rocks. They have never ever seen a plant in their life. They don't need much light, and some of my tanks are only decorated with pieces of slate and some caves I made myself, and they look absolutely boring and ugly, the tanks. But it's perfect for the fish. Also, I don't
Mm.
like to clean my all the glasses. I clean only my front glass because I want to see and I want to observe my fish from time to time, of course. But for the fish, it doesn't matter if the back or if the glasses to the side are cleaned or not. Most fish will actually prefer it slightly dirty because they can feed on it. But if you go into your tank twice a week to clean all the glasses, you always disturb the fish too. And in the best case, you just leave the fish alone, keep the tank practical, keep the temperature up. So I think many people also keep their fish too cold to save money, to save energy costs. That if you don't want to afford the money to keep a tank running on 30 degrees Celsius, then simply get a fish that you can keep at 26. So same story as before, only because of the zebra pleco can't scream, "Oh my God, I'm cold." It doesn't mean that it is not cold. And zebra plecos, for example, you can find them in nature at 34 degrees Celsius, and they're
Mm.
totally fine. So that's absolutely no problem for them. Same with fish coming from the Atabapo Basin. If you go to the Atabapo Basin and if you collect water parameters, you will find that many, especially of the smaller creeks, they have a pH of 3.5. And it's simply wrong to import a fish coming from such an extreme biotope and then put it in your common tank with angelfish and discus and I don't know, some Tanganyika cichlids at a pH of 7.5.
Mm.
So just go for the needs of the fish.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Give the fish what the fish need and want. Let's just dive into the temperature thing a little bit there. I'm assuming that
So-
not all fish. You mentioned that people are keeping their tanks too cold. Do you think that's as in a general rule, people are keeping their tanks too cold, or for catfish and L number plecos, the tanks are too cold for them?
I think it's more a general issue. At least in Germany, I know it from all the not all, of course, it's never all, but from many shops, especially those chain shops. They simply tell you that you can keep pretty much every fish at 25 degrees. 25 degrees Celsius in Germany is like the perfect temperature for all fish in the world. So that's how they sell it to you. And of course, it is one reason to go with a lower temperature to save energy. But I think once you are getting into the fish and once you read a book about any pleco from Xingu, you will see that they never experience temperatures of 25 degrees. So even in the rainy season, the Xingu doesn't drop in temperature. And even if you go down, we once dived down to 11 meters in Xingu, and the temperature was still 31 degrees. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
not like in other rivers where you go down 2, 3, 5, 4, 5 meters and the temperature is dropping. Xingu is always warm in every season at every depth. So the fish want 30 degrees, so give it to them.
Yeah, cool. Great. All right, well, that has brought us to the end of our structured questions. We like to finish our Finatics Friday Coffee Date with what we call the School of Six, which is six very quick, short answer questions. So if you're doing a coin toss, you choose heads or tails?
Tails.
Are you a tea or a coffee drinker?
Coffee.
Are we alone in the universe?
No.
Cool. If you could have a meal with anybody alive or dead or even fictional, anywhere in the world or from any place and time, who would it be?
If I could meet that person.
If you could have a meal with them.
Oh, well, the same. Ernest Shackleton.
Cool. Paper, scissors, rocks. What's your first call?
Paper.
Okay. And what is your unicorn fish? One that you either want to keep, write a massive article about, a book about, take photographs, see in the wild? What's that one fish that's eluded you so far?
I think in the wild, it's Acanthicus adonis. I haven't seen that fish yet in the wild.
Cool. And my last question for you is, where can people find you if they want to read some more of your work or see some of your photography? Where is the available places to find your stuff?
Possibly the easiest place is on the homepage of my club, BSSW. So there's all the contact information if you want any sort of photography information, more decent articles, something like that. Just drop me an email and I'll answer.
Cool. Thank you very much for being with us today. Much appreciated. Thank you, everybody that has been in the chat with us. There's been some fantastic, phenomenal questions come through, so I also really appreciate that. I hope you all have a really good day. Have a good one. Happy fish keeping and catch you later.
See ya.